The Great Plains, a sea of grass stretching from horizon to horizon. For centuries, this was the kingdom of the American bison, 60 million strong. For the people who lived here, the buffalo was everything: food, shelter, clothing, tools. But to hunt the buffalo, to turn this 2,000-pound beast into the stuff of life, required a specialized set of tools. Not just the famous bow and the powerful rifle, but a collection of forgotten implements, each a masterpiece of function and form. What were these tools, and how did they allow a hunter to transform a thundering giant into the resources that sustained a nation? These 7 tools weren't just for hunting. They were the keys to life on the Great Plains. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Number 1. The Buffalo Lance. A lone hunter on horseback, his body painted for the hunt, gallops alongside a stampeding buffalo. The ground trembles, the air is thick with dust and the thunder of hooves. The hunter holds a 14-foot lance, its steel point gleaming in the sun. He closes the distance, his horse running flat out. With a powerful thrust, he drives the lance deep into the buffalo's side, just behind the rib cage. The beast stumbles, and the hunter pulls back, his lance now stained with the lifeblood of the plains. The buffalo lance, or wahukeza in the Lakota language, was the quintessential weapon of the mounted buffalo hunter. While the bow and arrow were effective, the lance was a specialized tool designed for the close quarters, high-speed chaos of a buffalo run. It was a weapon of immense power and surprising grace, a simple tool that, in the right hands, was devastatingly effective. The shaft of the lance was typically 10 to 14 feet long and made from ash or hickory, woods chosen for their combination of strength and flexibility. Ash was preferred for its straight grain and resistance to splitting, while hickory provided exceptional shock absorption. The shaft was 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter at the grip, tapering to 1.25 inches at the point end, thick enough to withstand the impact of a charging buffalo, yet light enough to be wielded from horseback at full gallop. The wood was carefully selected from trees that had grown straight and tall without knots or defects. The shaft was straightened by heating it over a fire and bending it into shape, a process that could take days to complete. The wood was heated to approximately 200 degrees Fahrenheit, just hot enough to make the fibers pliable without burning them. The hunter would then slowly bend the shaft against a series of wooden forms, holding each position until the wood cooled and set. This process was repeated multiple times until the shaft was perfectly straight. The shaft was then sanded smooth with sandstone, starting with coarse grit and progressing to fine grit until the surface was glass smooth. The grip area, located 18 to 24 inches from the butt end, was often wrapped with buffalo hide or fur to provide a secure hold even when wet with blood or sweat. The shaft was often decorated with brass tacks, eagle feathers, and fur, each element a marker of the owner's spiritual power and hunting prowess. The brass tacks were arranged in geometric patterns and served both decorative and practical purposes, as they helped to strengthen the wood at stress points. The lance head was the business end of the weapon. Before the arrival of Europeans, these were made from chipped stone, typically obsidian or knife river flint, or even sharpened bone. But the introduction of metal transformed the lance. Hunters began to trade for pre-made steel lance heads, or they would forge their own from old sword blades, wagon parts, or any other piece of high-carbon steel they could acquire. A typical trade lance head was 12 to 18 inches long and 2 to 3 inches wide, with a diamond-shaped cross-section for strength and a needle-sharp point. The blade was socketed, meaning it had a hollow cone at the base where the wooden shaft was inserted. The shaft was secured in the socket with a combination of bison sinew glue and a steel pin, creating a bond that was nearly unbreakable. A skilled hunter could use the lance with surgical precision. Riding at full gallop, he would aim for a specific spot on the buffalo's body, a hand's width behind the last rib, driving the lance head upward and forward into the animal's heart and lungs. A single well-placed thrust was often enough to bring down a full-grown bull. The The length of the lance was critical, allowing the hunter to strike from a relatively safe distance, avoiding the buffalo's deadly horns and hooves. Number 2. The skinning knife. The hunt is over. A massive bull lies on the prairie grass. The hunter dismounts, his work only half done. He pulls out his skinning knife, a tool that is both a practical necessity and a work of art. The blade is short and curved, the handle made from the jawbone of a buffalo. With a series of precise, practiced cuts, he begins the arduous process of skinning the animal, a task that will take hours of patient, skilled labor. The skinning knife was a buffalo hunter's most essential tool after the kill. A full-grown buffalo could weigh over 2,000 pounds, and its hide alone could weigh 100 pounds. Removing that hide was a monumental task, requiring a knife that was both razor-sharp and incredibly durable. The design of the skinning knife was perfected over centuries, a testament to the ingenuity of the Plains people. The blade of a typical skinning knife was 4 to 6 inches long and made from high-carbon steel containing 0.8 to 1.2% carbon, often repurposed from an old file or a broken trap spring. Files were particularly prized because they were already made from high-quality steel and had the proper hardness for holding a sharp edge. The steel was heated in a forge to 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, hammered into shape on an anvil, and then quenched in water or oil to harden it to 60 to 62 HRC on the Rockwell scale. The blade was then tempered by heating it to a lower temperature, around 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which gave it the toughness to withstand the rigors of skinning without breaking. The tempering process was critical. Too little heat and the blade would be brittle and prone to chipping. Too much heat and it would be too soft to hold an edge. The blade was sharpened to a razor's edge with a pronounced curve that followed the natural contours of the buffalo's body, allowing the hunter to make long, sweeping cuts without puncturing the underlying muscle or organs. The curve of the blade was typically a gentle arc with a radius of 8 to 10 inches, and the cutting edge was ground to a 20-degree angle on each side. The spine of the blade was left thick, typically 1/8 to 3/16 inch, to provide strength and prevent the blade from flexing during use. The point of the blade was kept sharp but not needle-pointed, as a too sharp point would be prone to breaking when it encountered bone or cartilage. The handle of the skinning knife was just as important as the blade. It needed to provide a secure grip, even when slippery with blood. Many handles were made from bone or antler, which were durable and provided a natural textured grip. A particularly prized material for handles was the jawbone of a buffalo, which was not only strong but also held a deep spiritual significance. The handle was attached to the blade with a tang that was either driven into the handle and secured with sinew, or with a full tang that was sandwiched between two pieces of bone or wood and held in place with brass or iron pins. The process of skinning a buffalo was a ritual in itself. The hunter would make a series of precise cuts, starting at the neck and working his way down the belly. He would then begin to peel the hide back, using the knife to sever the connective tissue that held the hide to the muscle. It was a slow, methodical process, requiring both strength and finesse. A single slip of the knife could damage the hide, rendering it useless for a tipi cover or a winter robe. Number 3. The fleshing tool. The hide is off, a massive, heavy blanket of skin and hair, but it is far from ready. It is covered in a thick layer of fat and muscle, a feast for flies and a source of rot. A woman takes over now, her domain the camp, her tools the instruments of transformation. She drapes the hide over a log and begins to work with a fleshing tool, a heavy adze-like implement made from the leg bone of a buffalo. With each downward stroke, she scrapes away the excess flesh, her movements a blur of practiced efficiency. Once the hide was removed from the buffalo, the real work began. The hide was a valuable resource, but it was also a perishable one. If not properly prepared, it would quickly rot and become useless. The first step in this process was fleshing, the removal of the thick layer of fat, muscle, and connective tissue that clung to the inside of the hide. This was a physically demanding job, and it required a specialized tool, the the fleshing tool. The fleshing tool was a heavy, adze-like implement, typically made from the tibia or femur of a buffalo. The bone was split lengthwise using a stone maul and wedges, creating two halves. One half was selected based on its straightness and lack of cracks. The working end was sharpened to a chisel-like edge with a 45-degree bevel, ground smooth on sandstone until it could shave hair from a man's arm. The tool was 12 to 18 inches long and weighed 2 to 3 pounds, giving it the heft needed to scrape away the tough, stringy flesh that clung to the hide. The handle of the fleshing tool was often wrapped in rawhide to provide a secure grip and prevent blisters during the hours of scraping required to clean a single hide. The rawhide was applied wet and allowed to shrink as it dried, creating a grip that was both comfortable and secure. Some fleshing tools had a metal blade made from an old gun barrel or a piece of scrap iron, which was hafted onto the bone handle with sinew and pine pitch. These metal-bladed tools were more efficient than their bone counterparts, maintaining their edge longer and cutting through the tough connective tissue more easily. The metal blades were typically 4 to 6 inches wide and were ground to a specific angle. Too steep, and the tool would dig into the hide and damage it. Too shallow, and it would not cut effectively. The optimal angle was found to be 30 to 35 degrees, which provided the best balance between cutting efficiency and hide preservation. A skilled woman could flesh an entire buffalo hide in 4 to 6 hours using one of these tools, removing every trace of meat and fat while leaving the hide intact and ready for the next stage of processing. The process of fleshing a hide was a messy, smelly job. The hide was draped over a log or a specially constructed fleshing beam, and the woman would use the fleshing tool to scrape away the excess flesh, working from the top of the hide to the bottom. It was a slow, laborious process, and it could take several hours to flesh a single hide. The woman had to be careful not to cut or tear the hide, as any damage would diminish its value. Number 4. The hide scraper. The hide is fleshed, but it is still not ready. It is thick and stiff, more like a board than a piece of fabric. The woman now turns to another tool, a hide scraper. This one is smaller than the fleshing tool, with a short, curved handle made from an elk antler and a small, sharp blade made from a piece of flint or steel. With this tool, she begins to thin the hide, scraping away layer after layer of the thick, collagen-rich dermis. It is a delicate process, requiring a surgeon's touch. After the hide was fleshed, it needed to be thinned and softened. This was done with a hide scraper, a tool that was smaller and more delicate than the fleshing tool. The hide scraper was used to remove the grain layer from the hide, the thin outermost layer of skin that contained the hair follicles. This was a critical step in the tanning process, as it allowed the tanning agents to penetrate the hide and transform it into soft, supple leather. The hide scraper consisted of a short, curved handle, typically made from an elk antler, and a small, sharp blade. The handle was 6 to 8 inches long and was shaped to fit comfortably in the hand. The blade was 2 to 3 inches wide and was made from a piece of flint, obsidian, or after the arrival of Europeans, steel. The blade was hafted onto the handle with sinew and glue, and it was sharpened to a razor's edge. The curvature of the blade was important as it allowed the woman to apply even pressure across the surface of the hide, preventing her from accidentally gouging or tearing it. The process of scraping a hide was a delicate one. The hide was stretched taut on a wooden frame, and the woman would use the scraper to shave off the grain layer, working in long, even strokes. She had to be careful to remove just the right amount of material. If she didn't remove enough, the hide would remain stiff and hard. If she removed too much, she would weaken the hide and make it prone to tearing. Number 5. The awl. The hide is tanned, a soft, supple piece of leather ready to be transformed into clothing, a teepee cover, or a pair of moccasins. A woman sits in the shade of a teepee, a pile of tanned hides beside her. She is using an awl, a small pointed tool made from bone, to punch a series of holes in the leather. She then threads a piece of sinew through the holes, her stitches small and even. She is not just sewing, she is creating, transforming the raw material of the buffalo into the stuff of life. The awl was one of the most versatile tools in a Plains Indian's toolkit. It was a simple tool, a small pointed spike made from bone, or later metal, but it was used for a wide variety of tasks, from sewing clothing to making baskets to repairing a teepee. The awl was the needle of the plains, a tool that allowed people to transform leather, bark, and wood into the objects of their daily lives. The awl was typically 3 to 5 inches long and was made from the bone of a deer or an antelope. The bone was split and then ground to a sharp point on a piece of sandstone. The handle of the awl was often decorated with carvings or wrapped in rawhide. After the arrival of Europeans, metal awls became common. These were made from old nails, pieces of wire, or any other piece of scrap metal that could be sharpened to a point. The primary use of the awl was for sewing. The Plains people did not have needles in the modern sense of the word. Instead, they used the awl to punch a hole in the leather, and then they would thread a piece of sinew through the hole. It was a slow, laborious process, but it created a strong, durable seam that could withstand the rigors of life on the plains. The awl was also used for a variety of other tasks, such as weaving baskets, making snowshoes, and repairing tools. Number 6. The bone needle. While the awl was the workhorse of sewing, there were times when a more delicate touch was needed. For fine embroidery work, for attaching beads and quills, the Plains people used a bone needle. A woman sits in the firelight, her fingers a blur of motion as she sews a complex geometric pattern onto a pair of moccasins. She is using a bone needle, a slender, delicate tool that is no thicker than a piece of straw. Her stitches are tiny and precise, a testament to her skill and patience. For the finest sewing and decorative work, the Plains people used a bone needle. These needles were marvels of craftsmanship, slender, delicate tools that were made from the bone of a bird or a small mammal. The bone was split into thin slivers and then ground to a sharp point on a piece of sandstone. The eye of the needle was drilled with a small, sharp piece of flint, a process that required a steady hand and a great deal of patience. Bone needles were typically 1 to 2 inches long and were used for a variety of delicate tasks, such as sewing on beads and porcupine quills, embroidering clothing with intricate patterns, and repairing torn clothing. The small size of the needle allowed for incredibly fine stitches, and the smooth, polished surface of the bone allowed it to glide through the leather with ease. Number 7. The Travois. The hunt is over, the hides are tanned, the meat is dried. It is time to move on. The camp is a flurry of activity as people pack up their belongings. A woman dismantles her teepee, rolling the heavy buffalo hide cover into a tight bundle. She then lashes the teepee poles together to form a travois, a simple A-frame sledge that will be pulled by a horse. She loads the travois with her family's belongings, the teepee cover, the cooking pots, the bundles of dried meat. The travois is a simple but ingenious device, a tool that allows a nomadic people to transport their entire world with them. The travois was the pickup truck of the Great Plains, a simple but effective device for transporting heavy loads. Before the arrival of the horse, the travois was pulled by dogs. But the horse transformed the travois, allowing the Plains people to transport much larger and heavier loads. The travois was a simple A-frame sledge made from 2 long poles that were lashed together at one end and splayed out at the other. The poles were typically 15 to 20 feet long and were made from lodgepole pine, a wood that was both strong and light. A net or a platform was stretched between the 2 poles, and this is where the load was placed. The travois was attached to the horse with a harness, and the ends of the poles dragged on the ground. The travois was a remarkably stable and efficient way to transport goods. It could carry a load of several hundred pounds, and it could be pulled over rough, uneven terrain with ease. The travois was used to transport everything from teepee covers and cooking pots to firewood and dried meat. It was an essential tool for a nomadic people, a device that allowed them to move their homes and their possessions with them as they followed the buffalo herds across the Great Plains.